To remember the past, subscribe to the Shadows of Time.
Stand anywhere in Beijing today, and the city hums with motion. Traffic flows endlessly. Towers rise where walls once stood, and more than 20 million people live, work, and pass through a place that feels unstoppable. But rewind far enough, and Beijing was never meant to be a capital. Over 3,000 years ago, this land was the edge of China, not its heart. Northern China was a dangerous place. Beyond the plains stretched vast steppe lands, home to nomadic tribes who moved with the seasons and raided settlements. Early Chinese civilization thrived far to the south, along the Yellow River. Compared to that fertile heartland, the area around modern Beijing was exposed, cold, and strategically vulnerable. Yet that very danger made it important. The earliest settlement, Gi, was a modest fortified town during the Western Zhou period. It existed for one reason: defense. Walls mattered more than beauty. Soldiers mattered more than merchants. Gi was built to hold a line. During the Warring States period, around the 5th century BC, Gi became the capital of the state of Yan. Massive fortifications were raised, and roads linked Gi to military supply routes. They said, not through prosperity, but through pressure and purpose. Soldiers drilled, watchtowers scanned horizons, and fires burned nightly in signal towers to warn of incoming raids. When Qin Shi Huang unified China in 221 BC, Gi lost its capital status. Power shifted south. Yet the city did not vanish. Under the Han Dynasty, it became a major military command center. Garrisons filled the streets. Banners snapped in the wind, and patrols marched along walls. Beijing's role was becoming fixed. It was China's shield. Centuries passed, dynasties rose and fell. The city changed names, rulers, and importance repeatedly. Sometimes it flourished. Often, it endured. In times of unity, it guarded the empire. In times of chaos, it was fought over relentlessly. A turning point came in 938 AD, when the Khitan-led Liao dynasty made the city their southern capital. For the first time, Beijing was no longer just defending China. It was helping to rule it. Palaces replaced barracks, officials replaced generals, trade thrived, and culture followed power. Streets buzzed with artisans, market smells mingled with incense, and scholars debated philosophy in shaded courtyards. Soon after, the Jurchen dynasty seized the city and renamed it Yongdu, meaning central capital. Wide avenues cut through the city, markets overflowed with goods, and the hum of life reflected a city at its height. By the 12th century, Zhongdu was one of the largest and most sophisticated cities on Earth. Yet, Beijing's geography was both its strength and its curse. In 1215, Mongol armies under Genghis Khan besieged Zhongdu. The city was starved, breached, and burned. Fires consumed palaces and homes alike. Smoke blackened the sky, and survivors fled across the frozen plains. For a moment, it seemed Beijing's story had ended. Many cities vanish after such destruction. Beijing did not. The Mongols saw what every conqueror before them had seen. Control this place, and you control the north. Out of the ruins, they would build something even greater, transforming Beijing from a frontier stronghold into the center of a world empire. City of Khans, city of emperors, from the ashes of Gongdu, a new vision rose. The Mongols did not rebuild out of sentiment, they rebuilt out of strategy. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, understood something profound. An empire that ruled from horseback could conquer the world, but only a city could govern it. In the late 13th century, he chose this ruined northern city as the heart of his power, renaming it Dado, the great capital. Dado was not merely rebuilt, it was reinvented. Straight, wide avenues stretched endlessly. Districts were carefully planned. Markets hummed with merchants calling across languages. Temples burned incense. Government offices buzzed with scribes, and residential zones followed strict order. At its center stood the imperial palace, symbol of Mongol authority. For the first time, Beijing became the capital of all China. Merchants arrived from Persia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. Exotic spices scented the air, silk rustled in the wind, and foreign tongues echoed in the streets. Marco Polo would later describe a city so vast and wealthy, Europeans could barely imagine it. Yet beneath the grandeur, tensions simmered. The Mongols ruled China, but were never fully accepted. Laws favored Mongols. Heavy taxation burdened farmers, and floods and famine weakened the empire. Slowly, resistance grew. By 1368, a rebel army led by Zhu Yungan marched north. The Mongols fled Dadu. The city fell not with fire, but silence. The Yuan dynasty ended, and the Ming dynasty was born. At first, Ming rulers turned away from Beijing. The capital moved south to Nanjing, and Dadu was downgraded, Renamed Beiping Northern Peace. Yet history was not finished with it. Zhu Di, son of the first Ming emperor, was stationed in Beiping as a prince. He commanded armies and knew the northern frontier. When civil war broke out, he seized the throne, becoming the Yongle emperor. In 1421, Yongle moved the capital back north. Beiping was renamed Beijing, northern capital. From here, the emperor could control the army, confront northern threats, and rule the empire with an iron grip. What followed was one of the greatest construction projects in human history. The Forbidden City rose, nearly 1,000 buildings, built by over 1 million workers. Golden roofs gleamed under the sun. Stone courtyards stretched endlessly. Walls were expanded, gates fortified, and the city was aligned with cosmic principles, blending politics with heaven. For over 2 centuries, Ming emperors ruled from Beijing. Markets thrived. Scholars debated philosophy in courtyards. Temples filled with incense and prayer, and art flourished. Beyond the walls, the northern frontier waited, always a reminder that power could never rest. And beyond that, a new force quietly grew. The Manchus were coming. Glory behind the walls in 1644. The gates of Beijing opened again, this time to the Manchus, warriors from the northeast who crossed the Great Wall under the banner of order. The Ming dynasty had already collapsed from within. Peasant rebellions, famine, and corruption had hollowed the empire. When the last Ming emperor hanged himself on Coal Hill, Beijing did not fall in battle. It was inherited. The Qing dynasty made Beijing its capital, ruling China for nearly 3 centuries. At first, the Manchus moved carefully. They adopted Chinese customs, Confucian bureaucracy, and imperial rituals. Yet they never forgot they were conquerors. Manchu banners snapped in the wind. Ethnic divisions were enforced. Power was shared, but control was never surrendered. Under early Qing emperors, Kangxi, Yongsheng, and Qianlong, Beijing entered its golden age. The empire expanded to its greatest size. Tibet, Xinjiang, Mongolia, and Taiwan were brought under imperial rule. Tribute flowed into the capital. Envoys arrived bearing gifts from distant lands. Beijing stood as the political heart and the center of East Asia's world order. Inside the Forbidden City, life followed rigid ceremony. Every step, every bow, every word had meaning. Outside its red walls, the city thrived. Markets overflowed with merchants shouting. Aromas of roasted meats and spices filled the air. Opera houses echoed with music, and scholars debated philosophy in sun-dappled courtyards. Temples burned incense, day and night, signaling the city's devotion and discipline. But beyond the walls, the world was changing. Europe surged forward, industrial power and modern weapons reshaping the balance. The Qing court dismissed Western nations as distant and inferior. Trade was restricted. Diplomacy was ritualized. Innovation slowed. By the late 18th century, cracks appeared. Corruption spread through the bureaucracy. Population growth strained resources. Floods and droughts devastated the countryside. Rebellions simmered. Beijing remained magnificent, yet the empire it governed weakened. Then came the Opium Wars. In the mid-19th century, British gunboats shattered China's isolation. Ancient defenses crumbled under modern cannons. Though battles were fought far from Beijing, their consequences reached its gates. Unequal treaties signed, foreign influence grew, churches rose beside temples, and diplomats strolled streets once reserved for emperors. The capital of a proud civilization now hosted symbols of humiliation. The Qing court resisted change, then adopted it reluctantly. Reforms were half-hearted. Modernization clashed with tradition, and power struggles paralleled in 1900. Desperation exploded. The Boxer Rebellion erupted, violent, chaotic, and fueled by anger at foreign influence. Imperial forces hesitated. Foreign armies responded with overwhelming force. Beijing was invaded. Palaces looted. The Forbidden City violated for the first time. Smoke, cannon fire, and fear filled the city. Behind the walls, emperors still ruled, but the world they governed no longer existed. Beijing had survived conquest, fire, and rebellion. Now it faced something far more dangerous: the collapse of an entire system. The empire collapses. The 20th century arrived quietly, beneath tiled roofs and ancient gates. The imperial system that had ruled China for over 2 millennia was collapsing under its own weight. By 1900, the Qing dynasty was already a shadow of its former power. Foreign armies had marched through Beijing. Indemnities drained the treasury, and reforms came too late. Inside the Forbidden City, emperors still performed rituals that no longer commanded respect. In 1908, the Guangxun Emperor died under mysterious circumstances. Empress Dowager Cixi followed a day later. On the throne sat a child, Pui, barely 3 years old. The empire was now ruled in name only, surrounded by officials who could not save it. Outside the palace walls, the country was breaking apart. Revolutionaries spread nationalism, republicanism, and modern ideas. Students read foreign texts. Soldiers questioned loyalty. The old order, built on hierarchy and tradition, could no longer meet the demands of a changing world. In 1911, provincial uprisings spread rapidly. One by one, regions declared independence from Qing rule. The imperial court in Beijing watched helplessly as the empire unraveled. By 1912, the unthinkable happened. The last emperor abdicated. The Qing dynasty ended, and imperial China was no more. The Forbidden City remained silent. Its purpose vanished. The Dragon Throne was empty. The new Republic of China briefly named Beijing its capital, but power was fragile. Warlords carved the country into territories. Armies marched through streets, flags shifted, and political factions rose and fell. Beijing became a prize rather than a center. In 1928, the capital moved south to Nanjing. Beijing was renamed Beiping, Northern Peace. The name reflected loss, yet history did not release it. In 1937, Japanese forces invaded northern China. Beijing fell quickly. Streets were controlled, food rationed, and fear became daily life. Smoke and sirens replaced the market's hum. The city endured yet another chapter of foreign domination. After World War II, civil war resumed. Nationalists and communists fought for control. Beijing waited as history decided its fate elsewhere. Then, in 1949, the waiting ended. Communist forces entered Beijing without major destruction. This time, there was no emperor to overthrow. An entirely new political order claimed the city. Beijing was renamed once more. It became the capital of the People's Republic of China, a city that never ends in 1949. When Mao Zedong stood atop Tiananmen Gate, proclaiming the founding of the People's Republic, centuries of history echoed behind him. Empires had risen and fallen here, but this declaration did not claim the past. It rejected it. The new state promised equality, revolution, and a break from imperial rule. Yet the city itself could not forget. The Forbidden City remained. Ancient walls endured. The axis of power still defined Beijing's layout. What changed was not the city's bones, but its meaning. In the early years of communist rule, Beijing was reshaped ideologically. Temples were repurposed. Palaces became museums. Aristocratic homes were divided into communal housing. The imperial city transformed into a socialist capital. Then came the Cultural Revolution. Beginning in 1966, Beijing became the epicenter of ideological chaos. Red Guards flooded Tiananmen Square, waving little red books, denouncing the old world. Teachers were humiliated. Scholars silenced, historic artifacts destroyed, city gates torn down, hutongs vanished, memories erased deliberately. Smoke and slogans filled the air. Beijing survived, scarred, cautious, changed. Under Deng Xiaoping, China turned toward economic reform. Beijing entered a new phase. The skyline changed. High-rise buildings replaced old neighborhoods. Ring roads encircled the ancient core. The city expanded, swallowing villages, fields, and centuries of memory. In 1989, Tiananmen Square filled with students demanding reform. 4 weeks, Beijing balanced between hope and fear. Then, silence returned. Power remained centralized. The lesson was clear. Beijing would modernize, but on its own terms. In the decades that followed, transformation accelerated. Skyscrapers rose where walls once stood. The Olympic Games in 2008 announced Beijing's global arrival. Bullet trains connected it to the nation. Digital surveillance, data, and control became part of daily life. Yet, beneath the glass and steel, the past still breathes. Walk through a remaining hutong, and you hear echoes of dynasties. Stand before the forbidden city, and centuries of authority press outward. Tiananmen Square remains vast, symbolic, controlled, reminding millions where power resides. Beijing is not just a city. It is a system. Over 1,000 years, it has been shaped by one question: who controls the center? The answer changes: emperors, generals, revolutionaries, party officials. But the city's purpose remains. It has absorbed invasion, rebellion, ideology, and ambition. It has been burned, occupied, renamed, and rebuilt. Yet it endures, adapting without surrendering its core. The modern world speaks of progress as movement forward. Beijing tells a different story. It moves forward by layering the present over the past, never fully erasing what came before. It waits. And, as it has for centuries, Beijing continues to stand at the center of history, not as a relic, but as a living force, shaping the future.
To remember the past, subscribe to the Shadows of Time.